We got 1 second. All right, folks, we are live now. You could continue now, Brian.
Okay. Hello, this is Brian Lawrence. Thank you for joining us for this special meeting of the Mount Diablo School Board here on April 20th. It is 3:30 and I'm calling the meeting to order. I will begin by conducting roll call. I will start with Ms. Durkee.
Here.
Ms. Cound.
Here.
Ms. Mayo.
Here.
And Ms. Mason.
Here.
And Mr. Lawrence is here, so all 5 board members are here. We will go ahead and move to public comment. And we'll see where we have the pledge scheduled. Oh, that's sorry, I think I might have missed our Pledge of Allegiance, but we will go ahead. So we will go ahead and do the pledge. So I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic in which it stands, one nation, under God, with indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. I don't do it well unless there's a group, so my apologies. Thank you, Dr. Martinez. So, all right, thank you for bearing with me. I will practice better next time. But I enjoy the group participation on that one. So, all right, and then we'll move to public comment. And I believe that we do have one voicemail, which was emailed into the board, which was called into the board, which we'll go ahead and display. Are we able to do that?
My name is Adriel Briscoe, president of the Mount Diablo Black Educators Association. This message is to Dr. Martinez and to the board members. Hello. I was calling and I wanted to bring out, there was a letter that was sent over the weekend from the Mount Diablo Black Educators Association to address some of the concerns in regards to some changes that will be made within our district. With that, I just want to make sure that all school board members receive the letter. Second, I also want to address the fact that those concerns that was addressed in the letter, I just want to make sure that they're aligned with the local control accountability plan, because we know that the LCAP is designed to help create an environment for excellence learning among our students as well as our staff members. But I want to make sure that we keep in mind that whatever decision is being made that aligns up to the LCAP. Also, I think that this is a great opportunity for us to continue the work that we worked for, that we put forth in creating this LCAP, that we be the model, the national model of how to support our students, support our community, support our families, parents, as well as staff members. Thank you for the time and have a good day.
All right, great. Thank you for that. So I believe that was our one voicemail of public comment. Which for this meeting and going forward, we do have a phone number, which is area code 801-228-0093. And so that was called in, and we'll be using that for our future meetings where we are still practicing physical distance. We have emails that were sent into boardcomments@mdusd.org, and those will be attached to this meeting so that the public comments can be viewed. So that is it with public comment. We then move along to item 4.1, the review and potential approval of resolution 1920-51, designating agents for disaster relief reimbursements. Dr. Martinez, do we have any background on this that you would like to share?
Yeah, there's not, again, a formal presentation. However, what the resolution does provide for is, again, for LEAs, local educational agencies across the state who are working with the Federal Emergency Management Agency to make sure that we're requesting any level of public assistance that we have. We have 30 days from the time of the incident to, in essence, submit some of our claims for funding. There's no guarantee of the funding, but what we're looking to do is have the resolution prepared so that myself, Dr. Lisa Gonzalez, and Mika Arbelbide, our current interim director of fiscal services, would be the 3 individuals appointed who can proceed with the process of filling out the disaster relief reimbursements should we be eligible. And I'll turn to Dr. Gonzalez if there's a piece or two that I missed in this process.
Some of you, can you mute yours? Okay, some of you may have seen that there was a deadline of last week. The challenge that many of us raised is that when you're in the middle of a crisis, you can't itemize all of the expenses of dealing with the crisis. So it has been extended indefinitely until they consider the crisis being over. With that said, we are doing all of our prep ahead of time right now with staff to account for their time and their hours and all of our expenses, receipts, invoices, if you will, to make sure that when we are able to submit, we can do that quickly and as completely as possible.
Okay, great. Thank you. Are there any questions from board members before I entertain a motion?
Mr. Lawrence,
Yes, Ms. Mayo.
on these applications, are all 3 signatures required, or is only one of the 3 signatures required for the process?
I turn to Dr. Martinez or Dr. Gonzalez for that.
I'm reading it, it's a or, so it's one of us in that process to be able to submit the documents.
Great, thank you. Any other questions? Okay. Do we have a motion?
Mr. President, I move that we approve Resolution 1920-51, designating agents for disaster relief reimbursements.
Okay, and do we have a second?
Second,
I'll go with Ms. Mayo as the second, and we'll take a roll call vote. Start with Ms. Count.
Yes.
Ms. Mayo,
yes.
Ms. Durkee,
Yes.
and Ms. Mason.
Yes.
I also vote yes. Item passes 5-0. With that, we will move along to item 5.1, revision of board policy 5121, grades and evaluations. We received information a week ago on this, but Dr. Martinez, do we have a further presentation or further commentary from staff before we go to questions and comments from the board prior to the motion?
Yes, I'm going to ask Jennifer Sachs, our Executive Director of Instructional Support, to share just a little bit of information about this. Again, last week we were able to share the original thinking on where we were. We had the board meeting to discuss that. And again, to refine what this actually means in the process of semester for students in the grading process. So I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Jennifer Sachs just to give a little bit more clarity for the board.
Absolutely. Hello, everyone. Can everyone hear me all right? Okay,
Yes,
great.
thank you.
So just a bit of a recap to Dr. Martinez's point. These 2 board policies work in tandem, having to do with adjustments to our grading policy in order to reflect the very unique situation that we're in right now. We are in very good company as we are exploring the credit, no credit. Really the first policy, 5121, from when it was first presented at our last meeting, we have not made any adjustments, but what we have been doing is having a lot of behind the scenes conversations, specifically with our secondary administrators, really working with them to determine how do all the bits and pieces behind the credit, no credit be utilized in order to ensure our students are being held harmless. So we are working on clarification right now, not only for our administrators and our instructors, but also for our parents. When it comes to the elementary and utilizing the NA, which is not assessed, we've really haven't, there are conversations with the principals and the teachers and information that actually got sent out this morning about what that NA means. And it's not to be a reflection on the fact that this student has any learning issues or that the teacher did not do, what they were responsible for, but it's just the situation that we're involved in right now. We are also exploring having information on all of our report cards reflecting the fact that credit, no credit, and NA were being utilized as a way to hold students harmless in a COVID-19 pandemic setting. So that first 5121, there are no changes from when it was last presented. However, based on some of the board conversations and feedback on board policy 5123, we did highlight a bit of an adjustment there. And really it was based on a comment that was made having to do with, well, do we unilaterally say that there's to be no retentions or anything such as that in this situation? Or do we really need to take a look at it, depending on the nuances of when in the school year it occurred and what if there were extenuating circumstance with a particular student? So the highlighted area on page 2, what we adjusted the language to be is, in the event of a federal, state, or local emergency where the district is mandated to modify classroom instruction to include partially or fully remote learning for all students, students will be held harmless and will not be retained based solely on the inequitable impact of school closure and access to remote learning. At the high school level, credit, no credit marks may be issued according to board policy 5121. So that leaves more flexibility when it comes to the actual process, but we just wanted to make sure that, a student, whether or not they continue in a particular grade, it can't be based solely on access to remote learning or solely on the impact of a school closure. So that was the only change to the documents from last meeting to this.
What I would, again, kind of just restate to the board, we're working under unique times here. Again, something that we never would have thought we would have to consider with several weeks to go in an actual semester to end this year. And we have used our best pieces of information from California Department of Education, State Board of Education, State Superintendent's Office, Governor's Office, if you will, in the sense of trying to live out what the recommendations are of hold harmless. I understand as a philosophical variance, we have individuals who may be thinking the best thing to do is let my child have their grades and continue. And we also need to be thoughtful of every one of our students in this process of holding them harmless. Again, so the work that's being done with the UCs, with the state schools, with really colleges across the country, in essence, are saying we're understanding as well that this is a unique situation. In fact, again, the testing requirements for many students getting into school have been waived at this point. And as much as I can understand the philosophical concerns, and if we had a long time to really sit and discuss philosophical differences in how we're expecting kids to succeed in this pandemic differently, we might come to some different levels of conversations or decisions. But right now, we need to help our educators realize what they need to do. And so again, to our point, we're working with our educators today in distance learning for the students. And again, we don't have this information to share with you all, but we're gathering those levels of participation for our students. Well, we can say we have a fairly good participation rate. There are still a number of students that we haven't connected with just yet. And so I really am troubled in the equitable delivery, if you will, of grades in the process. While I can understand the differences, we're asking the board to, again, approve these documents. And we brought them here today for action so that we can continue with really the 5 weeks that we have remaining and get this information to our educators, inform our public. While we know, again, there will be some folks who feel that we should just let all grades stand and not even continue with school. We really do believe that as we continue our distance learning, this is the best way to go for the benefit of the larger majority of our students. And I'll leave it there if we have board questions.
Do other board members, I have a question, but do other board members have a question first? So Dr. Martinez, and we touched on it last week and you alluded to it now, but I think one request that board members have heard was the ability to, hold harmless students, but at the same time, give students the option to have their Q3 grade become their Q4 grade as well, and have that on their transcript. Could you just go a little deeper into why you're not advising that or the challenges with that, please?
One of the challenges that we came away with is that if in fact we simply gave the student the option at this point to say, let my third grade quarter stand for my semester grade, then we've really taken a look at a little bit different from even hold harmless, where some may simply decide, I'm done. And that hasn't been our direction. Our direction has been school does continue, education continues, learning continues, albeit in a different way. And so what we are trying to accomplish is, again, giving credit where credit was due. And again, our process with working with our educators has been to try and provide opportunities for that third quarter grade to get up to a higher level if possible. However, when we're looking at the entire semester, to extrapolate out and simply allow a grade to stand with, for us, it would be close to seven weeks of no guarantee of instruction. We just felt that we're really more realistically saying we understand the student would have received the credit rather than sustaining that level of success without potentially continuing to participate. So again, that's just one of our thinking on this situation.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Can I just ask a follow-up question on that? So can you talk a little bit about what other school districts are doing along these lines? Because my understanding, I think, was that we were aligned with actually all of those surrounding school districts on this, but can you talk a little bit more about that?
So what I would tell you is that in the process of working with the county superintendents and the Contra Costa County Office of Education, most, if not all, of our folks who have been participating in those meetings have decided to go forward with the credit, no credit marks for the semester. I could not speak to guarantee everybody across our county or even other counties have not decided something different. Again, this is left to a local decision, but for the most part, because of the way the guidelines were presented to us, in thought process of our own, and again, independently, different districts have come to that same thinking and understanding that the colleges are understanding this. It would be a little bit different if the colleges were still saying, we're looking at grades and our kids would be hurt as opposed to other students, receiving a benefit to this. But quite frankly, again, the entire state is being hurt by this, our students out of no fault of their own, and the colleges are recognizing that, the world of work is recognizing that. So again, when we looked at the decisions being made, we felt that we were in more alignment with going down this path rather than standing out, trying to do something maybe. And again, we have to recognize where our students are, the variety of skill levels within our students, our teachers, our technology. That's the understanding of really the inequities that are present in our system, rather than if we were a district where maybe 100% of our kids were on devices all day long and had access to the internet and all instruction could be guaranteed. I think you're maybe in a different place to make some different decisions, but that's not where we are. So we're trying to recognize the realities of where our students are dealing with, as we've kind of shared with a lot of information with our public. And so that's what's leading our decision.
Okay, great. Thank you, Ms. Cowan, for that question. Thank you, Dr. Martinez, for the answer. Do we have other questions or comments from board members? Okay. Do we have a motion on item 5.1?
I'll move. Mr. President, I move the approval of the revisions to Board Policy 5121, grades, evaluation of student achievement, and Board Policy 5123, promotion and retention.
Thank you, Ms. Durkee. Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, Ms. Mason seconded? Okay, I
Yes.
believe we had a second from Ms. Mason. With that, I will call for the vote. I will start with Ms. Mason,
Yes,
Ms. Durkee,
Yes.
Ms. Mayo,
Yes,
Ms. Cound,
Yes.
and I also vote yes. Item passes 5-0. Okay. With that, we will move to item 5.2, State of the Economy and Fiscal Impact Update. Dr. Martinez, I'll turn it to you, and Dr. Gonzalez.
Yes, thank you. Again, there's much in the way of happening as a result of COVID-19. And what we know is that there's been much in the way happening for us in our understanding of our entire budget structure. Our district, again, going back over the last number of months, has been very sensitive to implications or any changes to our budget, positive and negative, and trying to make sure we're understanding fully how that impacts us for this year and the following years. Again, I think it's important that this board has been really tracking those dollars. We've been working hard to make sure that information is provided to you. And now, quite frankly, given some of the dramatic changes that are going on in the state, across our nation, and globally, that impacts us fiscally. So again, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Gonzalez, who's going to walk through not a very long presentation, but really we wanted to start front loading some of these concerns that we're hearing about for you, our board, and overall our public, because this does have implications for us at the district. Dr. Gonzalez.
Thank you for teeing that up so nicely. I want to say, first of all, a huge thank you to all of those in the business side of the house, whether it has been transportation and getting ready for all the inspections that have been taking place. It's been food services and the warehouse teams. They're really every single day trying to make sure that everything that's coming into the district is able to be delivered out to school sites. Our fiscal department, who's really been working around the clock. Most of that team is here every single day. I just want to make sure that everybody understands how much we really appreciate all the work that they're doing. With that said, a lot of the information that I'm going to be sharing today, it is really all come from entirely reputable sources. Whenever possible, I'm identifying exactly which reports it's come from because I know that there may be questions afterward. But what we're really trying to do here is give a little bit of an update. I know that the times are really uneasy right now, and sometimes information changes fairly quickly. But this is really our best analysis of where we are at this point in time. And what I do also want to say is, if we could bring the presentation up, I'm going to be speaking from my office, but there, someone on the tech team, perfect, has the presentation and will be going through this. So next slide, please. The topics that we're going to be covering briefly, a little bit of a perspective from the Contra Costa Health Services, an idea of what a recession is so that we're clearly talking about the same things, taking a look at a typical versus an atypical recession and the historical impacts, where we're seeing savings and where we're seeing additional expenses that we might not have expected for this year, COLA and property tax implications, cash flow, which is going to be probably the most important piece of the work that we're doing moving forward, strategies to effectively manage cash, and then start taking a look at some of the numbers and what we're seeing as we move forward. Next slide, please. So I want to start by sharing some of what we're hearing from the Contra Costa Health Services, as well as the County of Santa Clara Public Health Department. And the reason that I'm including Santa Clara is because Dr. Sarah Cody, who's there in Santa Clair County has really been first and foremost in advising and working with all the counties. And she's really taken a very strong leadership role. And so the information that comes out through Santa Clara is always very current and very clear. And so we wanted to make sure that we're seeing these organizations working closely together. What they're saying right now is that a vaccine is not going to be readily available for at least 12 to 18 months. They're expecting a second round of infections in that October to November timeframe, which is typically when we start seeing students and staff getting sick, the weather changes and all the pieces with that. We will continue to need to be worried about our most vulnerable populations. That includes a number of our staff members, as well as children with underlying health conditions. Teaching and reinforcing prevention behaviors is not only going to be critical at school, but making sure that we share that with parents as much as possible. It's everything from the safe distancing to the hand washing to everything that we can do in order to stay safe and take care of one another. We're going to need to start really taking a look at what next year might look like with some continuum of distance and blended learning. Certainly the governor's been making some predictions on what he thinks schools are going to look like next year, and we'll continue to look at that through the eyes of Mount Diablo. Strategies for social distancing, as well as ongoing attendance issues that may pop up most specifically, are we going to see more students at school because parents are realizing how important school is now that all the children are home? Or is it going to be that we're losing some students now that they haven't been in school for quite a few months? And so these are all some things that we're going to keep in mind. Next slide, please. So I want to start by defining what a recession is. So a recession is defined as a period of economic decline in the gross national product that typically happens for 2 consecutive quarters. So you have 2 consecutive quarters of negative growth, which means that since most of this has started with our economy only about 30 days ago, we may not see that yet, except we have 3 very prominent organizations that have come out and reported a recession, including Forbes, Dun & Bradstreet, as well as the Wall Street Journal just yesterday. So we know that we are there, and typically what you see is a period of unemployment, drops in the stock market, and a slump in housing prices, a lot of which we are seeing right now. Next slide, please. There are 2 different ways that we can look at a recession. So I'm just going to start with some of the basics. In a typical economic recession, what we see is growth that slows, unemployment levels spike, which is what we're hearing on the news every day. There's negative or slowed growth in earnings. The tax base starts to drop, and recovery is slow. What we're looking at now is we're looking at a scenario that is really atypical because this is all based on an epidemic. So it's important for us to go back and take a look at the Great Recession and the Great Depression, but ultimately the recovery from this could be very different because we know that as soon as schools are open again, or even before that, as soon as businesses are open, as soon as shelter in place has been lifted, there are an awful lot of people that are going to go back to work. Now, by no means am I saying that everybody's going to be finding jobs again, because we're hearing of so many businesses that are furloughing or even closing. So there will be those implications. But typically right now, if we look at an economic recession versus what we're anticipating here are some things that might happen. Economic growth will slow, and then it will reopen. So that is sometime in the future. It could be May, it could be June, it could be July. Unemployment rates are spiking, but then they're going to recover. Again, it may be slowly, but as soon as that opening happens, there's going to be recovery there. The earning growth that we're seeing, we would expect to continue for the rest of this calendar year and then likely start at least balancing off. We would expect that governmental revenues are going to rise after the opening takes place, mostly because I mean, let's face it, for so many individuals that are cooped up at home, they're going to want to get out of the house. They're going to want to get out of town. They're going to want to go shopping. They're going to want to get their hair and their nails and everything else done. We're going to want to get our lawns mowed and all those things that right now we're not able to do. A lot of those things will result in taxes being collected by the government. And that's a lot of what we're simply not able to see right now with those businesses closed. And then, of course, it can certainly be rapid based on the reopening. But again, we don't know what any of that looks like. But what we are seeing now is it may not look like a typical economic recovery like the Great Depression or the Great Recession. Next slide, please. So what we want to do is we want to just quickly compare and contrast our current conditions. So in the recession, the Great Recession, this is starting in about 2008. It was really driven by poor lending practices. So we had mortgages that people couldn't afford, debt was high, no rainy day fund. As a matter of fact, in school districts, unlike anything we've ever seen, and hopefully what we're not expecting this time, by the end of December, beginning of January, back when this all happened, the state came in and they reduced mid-year revenue. They reduced the money that we had coming in. So even though 70% of our expenses were pretty much already encumbered for the entire year, especially with salaries, the state came back and said, we're going to take that money back. And so we were forced as quickly as possible to either borrow money or to do layoffs, which is extremely difficult. Now, again, it's very, very hard to predict. We have certain restrictions right now. We've had the state and the federal government jumping in fairly quickly with some of their interventions. We had a strong economy going in, especially in California even more so than the rest of the nation. And fortunately, this time around, at least the state had some rainy day funds. So again, there's certainly some things to be a little more optimistic about than there were in the past. By no means does it mean that we're in a great situation, but I think there's a little bit of a silver lining here to give us a little bit more positivity than we might think. Next slide, please. School Services last week came up with some points that we think are important to go back and take a look at. During the Great Recession, our buying power was 80 cents on the dollar. And it was like that for several years. So we don't know what that's going to look like, but at least it's something to keep in mind. Cash was cut nearly in half because what was happening was we have apportionments that come in from the state and they come in pretty even amounts every single month. And when the state said, we're going to not pay an apportionment or we're going to delay it, it means that we've got to go into our bank account where we've got cash and we have to cover all of our expenses every single month. And so that was a great challenge back then. And to start with, in California, schools were already on the edge of fiscal volatility. We were seeing that, close to half of our school districts only had the minimum reserve, that 3% that's required unless you're a district that's more than 30,000 and then that reserve is 2%. So the final reminder here, and I put it in bold, back through the local control funding formula, the goal was to get us back to the purchasing power that existed before the Great Recession of 2008. Just last year, we got back to where we were in 2007. And now we're taking some pretty significant steps backward. Next slide, please. This information is coming from CSESA. CSESA is the California County Superintendents Association. They have a business and administrator steering committee. They came out with this last week. They wanted to remind us that recessions tend to last 10 to 15 months, but of course the effects are much longer lasting in public education. And another piece that we're certainly hearing from many different avenues, but they reminded us of, is that the governor is going to be coming out with his May revisions next month. I think we're going to be hearing about that and the impact on public education on May 19th. We will then have to base our budget on the information in those May revise. The state of California will then approve a budget in June. that will not be an accurate budget because they're going to have to wait until property taxes truly come in, and they've delayed property taxes, and they're going to be delaying those. Those aren't going to be coming in until July and August, and then they're going to revise their budget, and then we will need to do the same thing. So we're expecting that the numbers could get worse over time. Next slide. So of course, as we're going through this, there are some natural ways where we see that we are finding some savings, as well as finding some expenses that we certainly were not anticipating. We've got some savings in utilities, in gasolines for our buses because they're really not running right now, materials and supplies because we do not have students and staff on campuses like we normally would, some of the assessments that we would be giving to students and the staffing requirements for those, as well as some of our contracted services. At the same time, we've seen increases certainly in the procuring of technological devices, whether it has been laptops for teachers, Chromebooks for students, some of the additional infrastructure that we need. A lot of the online learning, we're hearing, well, we need this license or this license, and so we're exploring that. Some of the funds for our cafeteria expenses, and the fact that we know that we're going to be applying for federal funds for our food and nutrition program because of the fact that right now we're creating and distributing about 40,000 meals a week. Certainly in custodial supplies, we've used a lot of additional custodial supplies, and we'll continue to do that, as well as overtime in many departments, including security. So we do want the public to know that right now we've got security around the clock, but we also need you all to be our eyes and ears out there in the community, that if you see anyone on a campus or on playground equipment, please call the local police department and let them know, because they're certainly working in collaboration with us to make sure that our school sites are safe. Next slide, please. Here's where we start getting into some of the information that isn't so positive. If we go back a year ago, in June of 2019, after the governor's May revise in May, in June, it was estimated that our COLA for the upcoming school year would be 3%. In January, we found out that it was going to drop to 2.29%. Within the last week, the Contra Costa County Office of Education has imposed a 3-year 0% COLA. And the reason for that is because every indication that we're hearing out of Sacramento right now is that we're not expecting to get COLA for 3 straight years. Now, I mentioned deferrals, and deferrals are, the deferrals are when we don't get the money from the state every month that we're expected to get. And that's what could make this negative. And a little birdie is reminding me that I should define COLA. It's right up there at the top. It's the cost of living adjustment. And the cost of living adjustment is what we get every year, because really the cost of doing business goes up. And truly it's a minimal amount if you think about it. If you're working with your own finances at home, you may see your electricity going up, and you may see your water going up, and you may see your insurance going up. And this is what we take a look at with COLA. So if we are to go to a 0% COLA, rather than having that 2.29%, we put a 0 in there. It means that we automatically out the gate have a $6.5 million reduction based on our second interim projected revenue. And this is the report that we presented in March based on the ending of our financial figures back in February. And again, back to COLA. COLA is offset by what's called the CPI, the Consumer Price Index, and it's really the cost of goods and services. Next slide, please. Cash flow is going to be something that we look at most closely. So if you look at this chart really takes a look at a fiscal year and a little bit longer in education. And in our fiscal year, it's the amount of money that we have coming in every single month. And so what you see is, you see these apportionments across the bottom in blue, and those are what the state gives us for funding. And so if the state were to say in June and July, we're not going to give you the funding for that month. We're going to kick it another month down the road, just like a homeowner would have to do with their own budget. If they had no income for that month, they've got to go into their savings and they've got to be able to cover what comes in for that month. Now, the last time that we went through the Great Recession, what the state did was, I believe there was 1 month where they didn't just defer, they didn't give us the payments at all, because they felt that, okay, we're telling you that you need to be conservative with money, so you're not spending, and since we know you're not spending, we know that you have cash on hand, and so therefore we're going to come back and we're just not going to give you the money that we told you that we were going to give you. Likewise, as you look at June and July, sort of here on the right side, those are months where typically you're not going to get as much anyway. And so if the state starts kicking those apportionments 1 to 2 months down the road, it means that there's a whole lot more we've got to cover there. Likewise, if you look at the red, that's where we see the bulk of our expenditures. So we spend a lot of money in August, but the bills come to get paid in the month of September. And that's where we see a huge jump because school has started. We see it again in December, we see it again in March, and then we see sort of everything coming to fruition with invoices being paid in June. And then you see property tax. We see property tax coming in 2 different times of the year. So you can see how our money doesn't come in nice, even flows. And we're going to have to make sure that what we have is going to remain as carefully watched as possible. Next slide, please. So what are we going to do to address?
Dr. Gonzalez, could I ask a question on that, please?
Sure.
On the previous slide, so we show that in April, do the property taxes, and in December, do they come in as one lump sum, or is it on a roll? So do we have any insight? Are we still waiting for that money here in April, or have we seen it? Can you give us an update on that, please?
So it's the property tax is due in April and it comes in a month or 2 later is what I'm hearing, in a lump sum.
Okay, so we'll receive a lump sum in May or June from the county based on property taxes, which are being paid now.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
But weren't people able to defer their property taxes that were due in April?
Not
It was income.
not in our county. I believe there are 3 counties that have done that: Kern County, San Francisco, and there's a third one. I want to say it's somewhere here in the Bay Area where they were able to defer, but that has not been done any place else that I know of in the state. Yeah.
So that funding is still coming in. Okay, thank you.
This is Linda. Even though the December and April are the months where property owners submit their taxes, aren't the taxes distributed through public schools throughout the year? Because it goes to Sacramento and comes back down.
Okay, so I have someone else in the room who's helping to feed me some of this information because it's pretty complicated and we're double checking here. But the numbers of defaults we're seeing right now are coming in much higher than we would typically be expecting as well. So we can expect to see a drop in property taxes. Okay. The term that the county office and others keep reminding us of, whether it's school services, whether it's FCMAT, whether it's SESSA, is really cash is king. And so what we're now being expected to do by the county office, and certainly because this is a good business practice, is that we've got to predict our cash well into not only the next school year, 2021, but the school year after that, 21-22. And so we're going to be expected to keep in very close contact with the county controller to really understand what the impact is of April's property tax collection month and what's going to be happening with some of those payments. What we're doing internally is we are delaying most discretionary purchases. We've let all of our school sites know that unless it's an emergency, we're not processing purchase orders. We're not going to be processing a lot out of the warehouse unless it's something that they absolutely need to get through now to the end of the year. We're certainly taking a look at that on a day-by-day basis, and thanks to our director of purchasing and warehouse, Elizabeth McClanahan, because she's working very carefully and keeping in close contact, not only with me and the checking that we're doing, but also with the warehouse team to make sure deliveries do get out. So wanted to do a quick shout out. We may have to look at temporary inter-fund borrowing, and so the board can expect that I'm going to be bringing 2 resolutions forward just to give us a little bit of security in case we need to do this. What it means is it means that other accounts that are restricted, we can go in and we can borrow some of those funds temporarily. It's not intended to be long-term. We've got to come up with a way to quickly be able to repay that, but it does allow us to do that borrowing if indeed the state does move down the road of deferrals. But again, there will be board resolutions coming forward, one for this fiscal year and one for the next fiscal year. We will have to look into the options of tax and revenue anticipation notes, otherwise known as TRANS, and or borrowing from the county office or the county treasurer, and certainly maintaining our reserves is really going to be one of the most important things that we can do right now. And again, this information is a big reminder coming from FCMAT and their memo that came out this month. Next slide, please. This information came directly from the Department of Finance, March 24th, which means that it's a little outdated, but they were telling us then to anticipate worst case scenario, and certainly what we've been seeing since then hasn't been a whole lot of rosy at all. I've highlighted the key parts. What's going on with the economy right now is going to have negative effects on anticipated revenue. The department will continue to reevaluate all of its budgets, but agencies and departments, that is us, should have no expectation of full funding for either new or existing proposals and adjustments. So at the onset, all the information that we heard from the governor's January budget memo, additional money towards special education, additional money for special education preschool, competitive grants for professional development, and a number of other smaller pieces. To start with, all those are out the window, and then we start looking at where there will be additional reductions on money that we typically would expect to get every single year. And we don't even talk about deferrals in here from the perspective of things like MA, the Medicare deferral, and some of those other ones that sometimes that we get as a surprise, because those won't be coming forward either. Next slide, please. So what we want to do is we want to talk about some of the next steps. What you'll see here in black is what the state will be doing. In red will be our reaction to it. The governor again is going to come up with his May revise. It's going to give us some details, not a whole lot, again, because we're right in the middle of this. We will create our budget based on the May revise and the guidance that we get from the Contra Costa County Office of Education as far as what they expect us to have in our budget for next year. The state is going to approve a working budget in June. We know that the numbers are not going to be accurate, but they're going to approve a working budget. The tax revenue will then come in July and August. And then the state will revise its budget. And then we will submit a revised 45-day budget within 45 days of what it is that they're going to do. Again, if the state budget decreases, we will face more reductions that would likely start in September or October. Next slide, please. So in planning for the worst case scenario, we've put some numbers to what it is that we're talking about, what it is that we're hearing, and what we've been directed so far to do with regards to some of this planning. And I think this is important because when we start seeing these numbers, we start better understanding some of the situation that we could be in. So to start with, we've been told to expect a 0% COLA for each of the next 3 years. For the 2021 school year alone, it means $6.5 million less in revenue than we would have expected. We know that there will be deferrals and possibly an elimination of monthly apportionments. We're hearing that that's going to start in June, so it wouldn't even be in a new fiscal year. We're hearing that the month of June's apportionment will not come until July, which means that we're going to be basically make sure that we've got cash to cover our expenses for the month of June. We are now hearing because of the impact. So when you have a stock market that's dropped significantly. You've got CalPERS and CalSTRS. This is the two systems that are set up for retirement for the two different types of employees that we have in all of our districts. What happens is those are all based on investments. So when those investments drop, school districts are going to be required to make up that differential. So what we are now hearing is that we're going to need to make up approximately 1% per year for PERS and for STRS. So that's about $1 million of a reduction per year, and that compounds. They're telling us that we need to look at all the out years. So it compounds year after year, so the amounts add up. We're expecting a 20% reduction in lottery. So based on what we get in lottery funds, that's approximately $1.3 million. We're expecting a 20% reduction in local revenue. That's approximately $3 million. We don't know what's going to happen with health benefits, but we're being told that we should really take a look at that because that could happen. And again, I've mentioned cash flow. I'll continue to mention it. We're going to need to watch this really bi-weekly for at least the next year or so to make sure that we're in a position, because roughly we have about $18 million a month in payroll that we have to cover. So if we're not getting that money from the state, we have to make sure that that money is available in cash so that we can make sure that our employees get paid. Anything else? No. Yeah. Okay. So what we do is when you take all those reds and you add them up, it means that right now we're expecting a revenue reduction heading into the 2021 school year of approximately $11.8 million, as well as delayed apportionments for the rest of the year.
Dr. Gonzalez, this is Dr. Martinez. I wanted to make sure and reiterate a point that you made, that this is not just us in Mount Diablo saying, let's take a look at all the numbers and let's anticipate some data on our own. That the word was directed. We've been directed that as we're starting to build our budget for next year, that these, in essence, assumptions have been provided to us by the folks who work to oversee, support, guide us, approve our budget, if you will. Even though we're a local entity, we still have to follow this guidance of using these numbers for way of projection. Because again, just for example, the 0% COLA, we didn't just decide that. It's basically the direction we're receiving as we're developing the budget. You must put in there a 0% COLA. I just think that's a very important point, that these were directives that we've been receiving in essence from the different agencies, but really even from our own county who approves our budgets.
Correct. So one of the points that I didn't touch on here is that the county office let all of us know a week ago that the current expectation is that we've got 30 days to get them a revised second interim, but only the multi-year projection. And in that, we have to give them basically an analysis of 0% COLA across the board. So we've got to go back and we really have to change how we're looking at this year and the next 2 years, and then certainly looking forward to that third year as well. But we've already started doing that for the current school year. And then what they want us to identify is closely look at our cash flow over the course of the next 2 years as a result of that. So we've got about 24 more days to get this report into the county office. And it's something that we're working on right now, on top of the fact that because our budget went from positive to qualified, we are already required to do a third interim, and that third interim will close at the end of April and will need to be to them by, I think, the end of May. I think they have to have that by the 1st of June. So we'll need to have a special board meeting to go back and actually approve that third interim budget. So the next slide, open to any other questions or comments, and again, there are a couple of us here in the room because we always want to make sure we put our best minds together, because sometimes these questions are a little challenging, but we'll try to answer any questions that you have.
So there are some individuals in our community that question the advice provided by the County Office of Education. Are we seeing the zero COLA recommendation from other counties to their school districts within their counties?
I'm hearing yes, and I've got individuals here that are from other counties that also work and consult in other counties. They are all hearing yes. I know that a lot of what our county office has been doing has also been coming from their statewide meetings with their CESSA teams, and that's really all of the business folks in all of the county offices are coming down with these recommendations. It is also the advice and the guidance at this point from both FCMAN and School Services, and those are the two most reputable organizations that are really out there to advise school districts. I would say that CASBO, the California Association of School Business Organizations, is probably doing the same exact thing, but I just haven't read anything from them within the last week.
Other board member questions?
Question on the reserves and kind of our cash flow situation. My understanding previously was that minimum 3% reserve that we've been required to have is 6 days worth of operating. Am I remembering that right?
Yes, for us, it's about somewhere between 6 and 7 days.
So when apportionment is delayed by a month, our reserves clearly can't cover 30 days.
That's why at this point in time, what we're trying to do is make sure that we are spending as little as possible. We're trying to be as careful and as prudent. We're taking a look at the state and the federal funding that we have and the flexibility that we have to push those things into next year. So one of the things I talked to the principals about today in one of our Zoom meetings is that if you've got grants that are expiring and it's, specific types of grants like Perkins and academies, we're going to go ahead and we're going to say yes and we'll push those through. But really what we want to do as much as possible is keep cash on hand for issues like we could run into in June and July. And then, if we're able to carry our title dollars over further, if we're able to carry over some of our other funds, CSI, we'll want to make sure that, we're really trying to keep those in the bank as long as we possibly can.
If I could, again, when we go back to 2007, 2008, there were a number of different ways in which legislation was changed to allow districts to sweep dollars. We had a lot of categorical funds at the time because we didn't have the LCFF, and there were other dollars where basically they said, those dollars are all flexed. At this point in time, we don't have the same level of categoricals that we used to have, and we have not heard of any new legislation allowing for any type of flex for these other types of funds that we have as well. So it's really everything that we have access to. There's not many other pots of dollars that we could go to. So again, more important for us to make sure and set up ways in which we could manage payroll based on the dollars that we actually do have.
At the last meeting, sorry, Sharice.
No, go.
At the last meeting, didn't you say something about we got $500,000 from the state?
That is correct. We received state stimulus money, and that money is as of this moment pretty much accounted for and gone.
And that was mostly towards devices and things like that. Is that correct? As we move to distance learning and helping that, was that the majority of it, as I understood, or was it for other things as well?
I can get you more of a breakdown. It's really less for some of the technology and more, some of the custodial supplies, a lot of the overtime, a lot of the other expenses that have come up that I can explain.
Okay. Ms. Count, did you have a question or comment as well?
Yeah, so looking at our website, the budget solutions, I don't see, I know we approved the second interim report at, I believe it was our March 9th meeting. So where is that on did it get posted to the website after that meeting?
It should have been posted to the website. If not, under the budget solutions, I'm guessing that it would probably be on the regular budget page. I can't pull that up right now while I'm in this presentation, but I know that I have colleagues sitting on the other side of this wall who are listening, and if it's not up, they will be putting it up momentarily.
Okay, that would be great. I think it would be helpful for the public to see at least our baseline. I know you'll be re-projecting the multi-year, but people will be able to see where it started.
And so it would strike me that at this point, the board and the district have to go to a scenario of planning for the worst, but certainly hoping for the best. But I don't see, in light of the facts, another way for us to proceed. I think one of the questions that every board member has received has been around our tentative agreements, which we had been hoping to have approved in short order here, and we had taken measures in March to prepare us to do that. Based on this information, based on what I've heard from state officials, as I talk to other school board members, I do not see a way in which either one, we could go ahead and approve those agreements because of the radically changed environment, or two, even if our board did approve them, that the county would approve them. But I want to, until we have more information, until we understand what perhaps the May revise looks like from the governor, I think there are just so many unknowns here. Am I correct in that assessment? Or Dr. Gonzalez or Dr. Martinez, is there something that we're missing there?
No, you're not missing anything, quite frankly. Out of the sake of transparency, again, I think the story is before us that much of every type of process that we were headed towards with the $21 million focus on reductions was helping us get to a place where we would be able to not only approve the one tentative agreement that we have for 3 years, but look to support our employees, because again, that has been a board priority. And now, again, as we were on that path, we were scheduled to be able to continue to move forward in that vein. Of course, as we're now all trying to fully understand the impacts of COVID-19, yes, on our personal safety, then on our community safety, and of course, the fiscal stability of each family and organization. So right now, as an organization, again, almost as if we don't get to just create our own realities. The realities are handed to us as, again, we've just been describing and looking at the different points of data that we need to use to create our agency's budget. So now, again, there'll be more conversations that we'll have in closed session about this. But quite frankly, again, we're trying to get information out to the public that we are tracking this, we are watching it, we are concerned, and we're doing our due diligence to try and make sure that we provide fiscal structure stability for us as a district to be able to provide services to students, even though we also know that services to students is now changing and will be evolving in our best case predictions that we can make. But I appreciate that, Board President Lawrence, your thoughts on that.
And so, please, Ms. Mayo.
I think that was Ms. Durkee.
So we were both waving. Go ahead. I'll go after you.
I was curious if we've heard anything about the LCAP in conjunction with the budget, because normally we have to approve the LCAP first, review it, and approve the new LCAP in conjunction with the budget. is the state providing some leeway with the final steps of that process? Or is it continuing just as it has in years past?
Would you like me to answer, Dr.? Okay, so we were listening actually on a webinar from the California Department of Education on Friday. And what the rumor is that very, very soon, sometimes beginning of this week, there might be communication pushed out to say that the LCAP is going to be postponed. And really, this is important to know because we were supposed to be doing our new 3-year LCAP this year. And so really what we're understanding is that they may be postponing it and have it due early in winter, possibly with a November, December due date, and then with the approval by the county office by January of 2021. So we should be hearing something in the next 2 days, because we also have been asking that same question. Board Member Mayo is, these two things are so intimately connected. How do we do one without the other? But we're going to give it another couple days, and we're thinking we're going to get confirmation from the state that the LCAP is postponed.
Thank you. Ms. Durkee, did you have
Yeah, I
questions
just
or
wanted to,
comments?
kind of building off Dr. Martinez's comments, and then of course, Dr. Gonzalez's information that she just provided, and trying to be transparent and simpler, simplified a little bit. We were working on $21.5 million of reductions, which we hadn't yet accomplished, but that was the goal that was set. And that would have enabled us to follow through with the tentative agreements and, have a solid budget, or at least a good enough budget. But now we're talking about needing to do an additional $11.8 million in reductions. Is that a fair statement, accurate statement?
That is correct.
Okay, I just want to make sure that everyone understands that. So, okay, thank you.
And, I think obviously for our employees, many of whom are, suddenly 2 incomes may have become 1 income and things like that. These are incredibly challenging times. And I think we recognize that, but this is the reality of what we're facing. I think we as a board will need to look at other cuts. I think certainly one of the things we need to look at is a potential across the board cut, which would include, I think the board stipends themselves would be first and foremost something we would look at if we are looking to, our administrators and other employees, that we may need to look at an across the board cut with the reality of this.
Yeah, that does seem like it's something that we're seeing in a lot of places now, where particularly the highest level salaried positions are taking a certain percentage cut. So that is something we likely would need to consider as well.
Okay. Do we have any other board comments or questions at this point? Okay. With that, so thank you, Dr. Gonzalez. Thank you, Dr. Martinez, for doing a good job of summarizing very bad news. But we appreciate you bringing us and the public up to speed on where things stand. And obviously, as we receive new information, we'll be sharing that. In light of these, the board is going to go ahead and move into closed session. We have 2 items. One is to discuss negotiations, item 6.1, where the board may discuss or provide directions to its representatives regarding represented employees, and will be our agency negotiators are Dr. Martinez, Lisa Murphy-Oates, Dr. Gonzalez, and Mike Berg, as well as Council Cesar Alvarado. So that is item 6.1. And then also in 6.2, the board will be discussing the superintendent's evaluation, as well as part of that will be regarding the proposed reorganization. One of the commitments from this board and from the superintendent are that we will be sharing these reorgs prior to any sort of movement forward on them, as well as, especially in light of the current situation, a very clear understanding of the costs of these reorg or the potential savings, which is certainly what we're looking for on those. So those are the two items. And then if I could, I would beg the board and the public's indulgence in that I feel badly that I screwed up the Pledge of Allegiance. And so I was hoping before we move, we could give that a second shot and hopefully if we could turn on the audio, because like I said, I've never in my entire life done the Pledge of Allegiance solo before. And so it threw me a little bit, but I do certainly want to, give our flag, our veterans, and everyone the due respect. So I was hoping that we could go ahead and if folks would indulge me and do the Pledge of Allegiance one more time. With that, with a flag, look at that. So I pledge allegiance to the flag
Of
Of
the
the
United
United
States
States of America.
And
and
to
to
the
the republic
for which
for
it
which it
stands,
stands,
one
one nation, under
Under
God,
God,
indivisible,
with
with
liberty
Liberty,
justice for
justice
all.
for all.
grow.
All right, so we weren't completely in sync, but thank you. I appreciate that. So with that, we will move the board to closed session, and then we will be reporting out back to the public after that. So thank you. And we will wait to hear from staff when we are in closed session.